Welcome back. You're watching Newsmaker Live with me, Kendall Burton. My guest this evening, Dr. Gail Rigobert, who will, as of February 1st, become the opposition leader. A little ahead of myself in my introduction earlier, but it becomes official on February 1st. You're also the parliamentary representative for Micoud North. Let's talk a little bit about Micoud North, especially in light of the Christmas Eve trough. What sort of damage was inflicted, and how have the recovery efforts been going on in Micoud North?
I must say that for Christmas Eve, on Christmas Eve, I was caught in the heavy rains while I was distributing gifts to the children. So I was soaked from very early in the evening. And when the power went, I thought this is serious. And I live not too far from the longest river in St. Lucia, the Tremasi River. And as I checked intermittently, I realized the waters were rising. And for all of the 30-odd years I had lived in that neighborhood, I hadn't seen the waters swell to that extent. So immediately I became very, very concerned. Then, you know, by midnight I had learned that perhaps there was one loss of life. And while it was unsafe to go out in the wee hours of the morning, I was very much interested in what was happening. By morning, it was obvious that we had been hit hard. Philadelphia Road, which is the main street in the Micoud village, was flooded. My office was completely flooded. I lost equipment, etc. Margaret was particularly hard hit. That river that runs alongside the Margaret village or community has since Thomas been very, very volatile. And every time there are heavy rains, there is flooding, the streets are muddied, the drains are clogged. And this time it was particularly bad. In fact, up until a couple of weeks ago, the streets had not been cleared. And I think I did a news item with one of the television stations, and thereafter the government moved in to engage in some desilting. I was called in as well because there was a problem with the mosquitoes. People said it was a mosquito infestation. And even while we were filming, we got some good bites ourselves, so I needed no further proof that there was a real problem. Since then, there has been some effort to remedy the situation, but this is not at all a permanent solution, because the river has been desilted previously and it floods again and again. So I leave it to the intelligent engineers within the Ministry of Infrastructure to come up with a more plausible and long-term solution. Because I would hate to think that every time it rains, that infrastructure has to move in the immediate aftermath to desilt the river. There's got to be a longer-term solution. Also, the Volet River broke its banks, and it was where the young man from the Lapwet Patience area lost his life, unfortunately. And that road too was badly damaged, but since then there's been a makeshift fix to it. I'm sure in the months ahead that a more permanent fix will be required. Some families were given mattresses a couple of weekends ago, especially in the Margaret area. There are families there who lost everything. The first house in that community had water up until had water at 8 feet, 8.5 feet. So they lost pretty much everything. And I must say they've been very understanding, very patient. When Nemo distributed the mattresses a couple of weekends ago, I was on the ground, and they were very, very pleased about that. I'm grateful that we did not incur any more than we did. I also took the time to visit ancillary and canneries on the last day of last year. I did a thorough walkabout in both communities, and it was a heart-wrenching experience to walk through neighborhoods where children lost all their books and households lost everything, it really hits you that there's so many people who are vulnerable and need our assistance. And but in all of this, people are just so resilient and so accommodating and grateful for whatever little help you can offer. I was particularly concerned, and I remain particularly concerned about the schools. I understand that the students have not yet received the promises of book packs, and they've got to go to school and to engage in a learning exercise, and I think these books need to be delivered in quick time. It's a couple of weeks now. I'm really hoping that there's a more permanent fix to the situation in Canaries in particular. I went to three schools, and it's obvious to me that one calls for relocation, and that's in the Canaries district. I don't think they can continue like this, and the principal, I had a thorough conversation with her, and the emotional and psychological stress was evident, and it was also evident on the faces of parents who we spoke with, and the children as well. But in all of this, people continue to smile, and the resilience is what is just so evident.
But are you satisfied with the steps being taken by the Ministry of Health, for instance, to offer counseling to survivors of the trauma, as well as health workers and the children?
In fact, when I was on the ground, that was one of the questions that I had posed, and I was very, very concerned because a lot of them recounted not only what happened on Christmas Eve, but they had a very immediate and present memory of what had happened through Thomas and Debbie. So what he had was an emotional build-up. And at that point, I thought certainly counseling is most necessary. I'm not sure that the intervention has been adequate. I don't know if it is for a lack of resources or personnel adequately skilled in the area of counseling, but certainly a lot more needs to be done, especially the school children. There were children who were literally running into the church to avoid the rising waters. Parents yelling at the children, "Please come, leave the house." And when you listen to those personal accounts, I mean, that must leave an emotional dent on your consciousness. And so I think it is important that the government do more than what is being done. I know there has been some intervention, but I'm not sure that it is sufficient at all, given what I experienced on the ground and the conversations I had with people.
Did the Prime Minister's recent speech give you or offer any explanation perhaps for the inability to move at the pace that you would like them to?
Kendall, I think that we have underestimated the extent to which people have been affected. It is easy for one to take a macro glance at the situation and reflect on it and account for it in a particular way. But when you get into the personal accounts and the personal accounts of loss and the emotional trauma, I'm not sure that I am satisfied that the government has done enough. And certainly it is very late in coming because it's already a month and more since the trough.
The Prime Minister in his speech spoke about the deficit, and every time he does speak about a deficit, it is linked to the, for lack of a better word, bad management of the previous administration, your administration, United Workers' Party administration. Is that a fair assessment?
It certainly is a very easy excuse. And the Sanusian public clearly are frustrated, or members of the public are frustrated. People are asking for more. I don't think you can say to people that I'm not doing my job well because my predecessor also did not do well or did not do as well as I would have thought. That is wholly inadequate and amounts to some level of disrespect. I think what the government needs to do is to be honest with the people of St. Lucia about the current economic situation, the inability to raise the revenues necessary to run this country, the extent to which the government has had to engage in all kinds of creative accounting to meet its current expenditure, the lack of economic activity, Like a gentleman said to me a couple of months ago, every day is a Sunday in Castries. And I think that speaks to the lack of activity, economic activity. Clearly, that we're in a lull. People want to hear not only the problems that beset the country, but they want policy solutions as well. And one would have thought that given the Labour Party was in opposition for 5 years, that they would have had adequate time to come up with some policy prescriptions that upon winning an election, that they would move very quickly to implement those. It would appear 2 years into the game that they still have no game plan or strategy insofar as the excuses that we got at the first public address are the same 2 years on. So the question is, what have you done in the interim? What kinds of policies or economic activities have you engaged in to ensure that the economy is stimulated? What have you done to ensure that we maintain our tourism figures and that tourists spend more and stay longer? Because that is where you can begin to tabulate the kinds of revenue that we're likely to generate. Why is it the private sector is not importing as much as it did previously? Why is it that there are still question marks regarding the so-called stimulus package? Why hasn't it had the intended effect? Why is it the government has not been able to raise the revenues that it had anticipated from the application of VAT? Why is it that the government is stubborn and hesitant to remove VAT on medication, given that we already know that non-communicable diseases beset such a large segment of our population? There's an insensitivity in that area. Why is it bus fares have to go up? Why was there a revision of the subsidies on sugar, flour, and rice? These are burning questions. So the solution public does not want to hear any leader of government stand and give a litany of excuses as to why things are not happening. There's no harm in saying what the state of play is, i.e. to give a realistic picture of the current economic situation, but more importantly, to come up with some policy fixes that will bring hope, realistic hope to the people who so heavily depend on government. So I remain largely disappointed, but there was something in this speech that was cause for concern, and that is, I suspect that the Prime Minister hesitated to detail the gravity of the current economic crisis that we're in. It could be that he does not want to create alarm, I don't know, and or perhaps his administration has not adequately read this situation. But the truth needs to be told to the people of St. Lucia, one, and two, that the corrective policy measures need to be spelled out as well. Now, going to the IMF, whether secretly or otherwise, is not in and of itself a holistic fix to the current problems that we have. And we know anytime we hear that a country has to go to the IMF, we know what the economic precursors to that are. We know what conditions would lead us to the doors of the IMF. And we also know that the IMF medication is not a sweet pill to swallow.
Okay. We want to remind the viewers at this point the lines are open, so you can call in if you have any questions or comments. Join the conversation. Our guest this evening, Dr. Gail Rigobert, the parliamentary representative for Micoud North, and as of February 1st, the opposition leader. Also in the Prime Minister's speech, when we talk about policy recommendations, he outlined some of the remedies to deal with the crime situation. How do you grade him on that?
Let's be very clear. I have always been very uncomfortable with the piecemeal approach to resolving the problem of crime. Many of the policy fixes are punitive and not preventative. And I think there needs to be a shift to more preventative policies, i.e., what are the conditions that lead to deviance and criminal activities, and can we stem those early on so that young men and women will not feel so desperate or so inclined to commit crime as a form of income.
Okay, we have our first caller. Good evening, caller. You're on the air.
Hello.
Hi, good evening.
Yes, I'd like to ask a question, please.
Go ahead.
Okay, basically, we all rely on the tourism industry. The increasing crime is alarming in St. Lucia. I'd like to ask Dr. Rigobert, how does she think we should deal with it? And secondly, in terms of tourism, how can we, in the point she made about civic citizenship, that should be taught at schools, how can we encourage schools to do more about, particularly in terms of tourism and also the crime situation on the island?
Yep. Thank you very much for calling.
Thank you, caller. Let me say that I'm not happy with how the crime situation has been handled with respect to its correlation or interrelation of tourism. And that is not that is a connection, a nexus that we must resist. When something goes wrong in our country, the temptation is always very quickly to associate it with tourism and the implications for tourism. Our first responsibility is the safety of our citizens, primarily. And then in terms of responding to incidents of crime, I think it wholly irresponsible of the Minister of Tourism to have to comment on it and be the one to assume the spotlight in all of this. I think it is a matter for national security. There is an inherent danger when the Minister of Tourism is the one reflecting on incidents of crime and making a comment. Because when that information is relayed in the media and in the news, it does not augur too well for St. Lucia as a tourism destination. And I think there is a clear division of labor within the government alongside cabinet designations, and crime should be a matter for national security, and Minister Lacarbonier should deal with that. I also think that the firefighting approach, the punitive approach, has proven to be inadequate and has failed, to put it bluntly. That what we need to do is to ensure that we can stimulate the economy, that there's employment, that we teach civics, that young people understand the rule of law, the difference between right and wrong, that there's place for spirituality as well, and all these things come together to produce a holistic and well-thinking citizen.
Okay, we have another call. Good evening, caller. You're on the air. Good evening.
Congratulations, Rigobert, on getting the post.
We can barely hear you. Can you speak up?
Yeah, I want to congratulate Ms. Dr. Rigobert.
Thank you, caller.
Yes, I like the way you. I'm a Labour supporter, but the way you spoke tonight there, I definitely will shift gears. I think I will join the United Workers' Party. I like the way you speak and all what you said there. I think that we have right now. I think we have a good opposition leader in the House. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. My dream come true. Political maturity. That you can identify your political affiliation, and there is no acrimony, no anger, and then you state what it is you have to say. We're getting somewhere in this country.
Although I suspect that the previous caller comments were based largely on what transpired recently. With
That's why I responded in that way, because I read that.
Okay.
Certainly that perhaps he was thinking in regards to the last incident, and which is rather unfortunate. And I think that we need to be more responsible in one, how we report crime, and two, how we respond to it. And I must congratulate the Royal St. Lucia Police Force, because they've made some significant breakthroughs in the last couple of weeks, given the various incidents of crime that we've had. And let me be very clear, this is not politicizing crime. I'm speaking to the issue of crime as it affects me as a good citizen, as it affects all of St. Lucia, and even more importantly, as it affects our ability to generate business for one of the key sectors of our economy.
You have another call. Good evening, caller.
Yes, good evening.
Hi, how are you?
I'm just calling to congratulate Mrs. Gail Rigobert.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, that's the extent of the contribution. Okay.
Thank you. Please, thank you. Thank you very kindly. Please keep praying for me. That means a lot. Thanks.
But I want you to go a little further into your comments about the crime, because undoubtedly, while you're right to a degree, we have another call. Good evening, you're on the air.
Hello, good evening.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm fine,
Hello?
thank you.
I'd like to say something. What I'd like to say is that as a little boy growing up, right, I never know there to be a female opposition leader. So I would like to say bravo to you. And also, I would like to become the Prime Minister. I'm praying for you to become the Prime Minister.
Okay.
I have faith in you. and I don't think you let me down. And one last point before I go. I don't hear anything from Stanley Fix about the evacuation of the houses in La Cleary. He's very quiet, eh? Or maybe he's out of the country or something. I don't know where he is. But he's not speaking. It's very quiet on that matter.
Okay, thank you,
So
caller.
anyway, good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, caller, for your
And that was
encouragement.
one of the issues raised on Facebook earlier, which I brought up. Do you care to comment on it?
Regarding the housing
The housing,
situation.
yeah.
The housing is one of the areas that has not received the kind of attention that it deserves. And I think we are at a point in our evolution that we have to give consideration to low-income housing, or to low-middle-income housing, affordable housing, one, and to some kind of regularization, because we have lots of what we call unplanned settlements, what colloquially we call squatting. And there's so much of it around the island that we can no longer turn a blind eye, because it has implications of access to the major utilities like water, electricity, telephone. And to the extent that, as far as I recall, that there's a requirement by WASCO that certain other legal requirements be met, that has implications for access to one of the most fundamental utilities. And I would really like to see the government undertake a holistic and aggressive policy to correct some of those issues and to ensure that there's some kind of regularization and that housing is more affordable, especially for low-income, middle-income professionals.
You have another call? Good evening.
And good evening to your guests also. Dr. Rigobert, I picked up on one of your points where you stated that you were not...
I beg your pardon, sir. Can you speak up a little? I'm having some difficulty hearing you.
I'm
Thank
saying that
you.
I picked up on one of your points where you stated that you're not quite satisfied. It having been about 1 month since the trough and the development, or should I say, what has taken place so far in response to the trough. One, I want to ask you, based on your understanding of from the time an event which is a national disaster has taken place to 1 month after, based on the cycle up to this point, to kindly explain to the nation what do you believe should have been done better or should have been done more in a more timely basis that would justify your dissatisfaction so far. The second thing I want to ask, that presently we have a number of claims being made against the former administration, which you have aligned yourself to, even before your admittance by the electorate as a parliamentary rep. We have a number of things that they have been accused of. We have a number of incidents that they have gone through the courts, and they have been identified as persons being culpable. For example, the Tuxedo Villas affair and so on. I want to ask you, what is your stance in relation to corruption in government, and to particularly address the results from the courts as far as your colleagues in the United Workers' Party and the decision that was given, where almost, in fact, the cabinet in its entirety being culpable as far as corruption is concerned, specifically relating to the Tuxedo Villas affair. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. Off the top of my head, I would have liked to see the government act more quickly with respect to ensuring that families were adequately equipped to send their children to school, especially in the ancillary canneries area, that they would have received their books and other school supplies in time for the reopening of school. There's some delay on that. In fact, it was in the Prime Minister's speech recently that he indicated that he'd be making donations of various amounts to families depending on whether students are in the infant, primary or secondary schools. Similarly, infrastructurally, I think that within the first 48 hours after the trough, that equipment should have been mobilized a lot more quickly. I think there were unnecessary delays. In fact, at the last NEMO meeting that I sat in, I know that prior to the hurricane season, that equipment is moved to strategic areas, areas that are prone to landslides and flooding, so that in the event of a disaster, that the equipment would be nearby and can move in to undertake necessary works. I don't understand why in some cases it took a little longer than expected to mobilize equipment to engage in corrective infrastructural work to ensure that the roadways were up and running.
Okay, we have another call. Good evening, caller. You're on the air.
Hi, good evening, Dr. Rigobert.
Good evening, sir.
Just a scenario. If during your term, as you've just accepted the role of leader of the opposition after the first, and knowing that Mr. Chasney, the leader of your party, has been taken to court by the government, when and if he is found guilty of those charges of the misappropriation of funds as was done in Soufriere, what would be your stand as leader of the opposition against your own party leader when, I'm saying first, and if he is found guilty of that crime, which might turn out to be that he is guilty and he'll be found guilty, yes, I think, because all the evidence was played out in the air. But what would be your stand as a leader of the opposition in dealing with that and all the other corruption in your party?
Kendall, let me be very clear about this.
Thank you very much, caller.
We are under no illusion that some of those allegations are meant to embarrass, to distract, and to create doubt and to question the capacity of this party to serve in government in the future. If and where the courts have sufficient evidence to suggest that persons are guilty of any kind of misdemeanor, the courts will decide what course of action should be taken.
You have another call. Good evening. You're on the air.
Good evening, Kendall. Good evening, Dr. Rigobert.
Hello, dear. How are you?
Dr. Rigobert, let me just start by saying congratulations. I feel so proud as a woman to know that we finally in this country acknowledge the contribution of women in every sphere of our lives, particularly, in politics. Because we all know that in the past it's just been a gentleman's game. But now that we have a woman in the position of opposition leader, I feel very elated and very proud as a female that we have a female in that role. So congratulations, congratulations, congratulations. I just want you to know that put God first in everything. He will lead you and he will guide you. Put your constituents next, because if it were not for them, you would not have been in this position. Having said this, I have a couple of questions for you.
Oh dear.
Some people are of the view that your elevation to the position of leader of the opposition was unconstitutional. Can you walk us through the process that led you to becoming leader of the opposition? And also, we know that communication plays a key role in the development of any organization. What are your plans to improve communication between the party and the members of parliament, considering the disagreements that have been played out in the media? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very kindly for your gracious comments and for your endorsement, caller. I must say that over the last couple of days, I've had lots of words of encouragement. And it appears that every time someone congratulates me, I feel, a tremendous burden of responsibility to deliver. But that's okay. The good Lord will bless me with the grace that I need to deliver efficiently in this job. It is important that we understand the process by which I became leader of the opposition. In July of 2013, the United Workers' Party held a party convention, which allows for the election of the party executive, which manages the affairs of the party. I was one of 2 persons nominated to the position of deputy political leader. Our party constitution allows for 2 deputy political leaders. We were nominated uncontested, myself and Mr. Leonard Spider Montoute. So automatically we became deputy political leaders. Our party constitution also states that where the political leader, and in July Mr. Alan Chastney would have assumed the leadership, would have been elected into the position of political leader, where the political leader does not hold a seat, it then falls to the person who holds the highest political office within the House to assume the position of leader of the opposition. In that case, constitutionally, it is me. Mr. Leonard Spider Montoute is in the Senate. So according to our party constitution, I should have assumed that position. As I said earlier, good sentiment and goodwill prevailed within the party. We recognized the contribution that Mr. King had made, and we felt there was no need to rush to replace him, as long as he understood and appreciated the seamless interaction between the party leadership and the MPs. Let us be very clear that there ought to be a seamless relationship between the party and the representatives in the House, insofar as in the first instance it is party faithfuls and followers who elect you based on the core tenets of your party, who elect you to the House. So your first commitment is to your constituency and to your party. Where it was felt that perhaps the relationship was not as smooth and seamless as one would have expected, then it was felt that perhaps the Constitution, the letter of the law, should prevail. The chairpersons of several constituencies, as allowed for within our Constitution, requested an emergency meeting of the National Council. At that meeting, I'm saying this because this is already in the public domain anyway. At that meeting, there was a vote 50-4 to change the leader of the opposition. I then became the natural beneficiary through no fault of mine, just by virtue of being the deputy political leader in the House, and in the absence of a political leader in the House. Having said that, and that is the beauty of the scientific, objective application of any body of rules and regulations. The minute you begin to deviate from what your rules dictate, you then leave it to subjective interpretation. And when you open up any activity, any action, any outcome to subjective reading, there is no telling where it will end. I believe steadfastly in the application of the rule of law. And it is unfortunate that we have had the kinds of public debate about the intimate happenings of the United Workers' Party. I have worked very closely with Mr. King. When I returned here in 2010, I worked within his ministry. I know him relatively well, and in fact I've known him for a long time. We all have known the name Stevenson King as a politician, and I trust that the party will continue to benefit from his experience. He is certainly one of the most experienced members of our team, and he has said in the meetings that I have attended where he has been present and where he has spoken that he remains a member of the party. And I interpret that to mean that he continues to uphold the core tenets of our Constitution and the spirit of the United Workers' Party.
Let's talk a little bit about leadership styles. If we go back to Dr. Von Lewis's time, we know that politics is very personality driven, and was felt, or is widely felt, that the loss at the polls wasn't so much a vote against the United Workers' Party as it was against Dr. Von Lewis himself, and his failure to deliver on promises to lead the party quite differently from the autocratic way that John Compton did. Stephenson King has been labeled a weak, indecisive leader. He's been removed, but then you would think that the support would shift automatically to Alan Chasney. It doesn't seem to be going in that direction. He has been criticized for not having a firm grip on the party as well. Do you think that can hurt him or the party in the long term?
We must acknowledge that whereas politicians exist largely under a party banner, that, as Mr. King himself says all the time, no one person is bigger than the party. Notwithstanding, we understand that people follow politicians because of who they are in and of themselves, and also they follow you because you're affiliated with a particular party. Naturally, that personal following, should you move one way or the other, tends to be sympathetic towards your cause, initially at least. And that perhaps that is what we're seeing in the first instance. But it is not unnatural, it is not unusual at all. And I smile because I know very soon the persons who long preceded me in this party and who I am sure love this party so much more than I do will do the right thing. And that is to breathe life and give meaning, true meaning, to what is embedded within this Constitution. And I see here unity, work, and progress. The name of the party, the United Workers' Party, says a lot. I mean, unity is fundamental not only to the United Workers' Party, to any institution, but we pride ourselves on that first key word, united. So I know those who have long preceded me in the politics will reflect, and when all the emotion has subsided and the dust has settled, that we will all continue to work together in the best interest of the party and the best interest of this country.
Shouldn't the dust have settled by now?
I think it's settling.
How do you respond to suggestions that the election of Mr. Alan Chasney as leader by the delegates does not truly represent the wide views and sentiments of the ordinary members and citizens of the country?
How is that any more or less so than Mr. Kenny Anthony, Dr. Kenny D. Anthony being elected the political leader of the St. Lucia Labour Party, or when previously Mr. Stephenson King himself would have been elected after Sir John's passing as the political leader, or when Sir Vaughan Lewis was replaced with Sir John Compton? How is it any different?
I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there's a feeling that he cannot relate to the ordinary man.
And I can hardly wait for our town hall meetings when St. Lucians get to see the real Mr. Alan Chasney, so they can put all those misconceptions that have been fabricated by our political opponents and those perhaps who have their personal issues one way or the other, that St. Lucia will meet the Alan Chasney who I work with every day.
Okay. The party is going to celebrate its 50th anniversary in a few weeks. What are some of the activities that you have planned, and what is the legacy that you think the United Workers' Party has developed over those 50 years?
Empowerment, people empowerment, education. Education. We must never forget that the United Workers' Party took St. Lucia through many of its key developmental stages, if we are to use the analogy of a human being developing. Infancy through to puberty and through to maturity. I think we can say we're in early adulthood now, in our 30s. And during that time, the United Workers' Party would have been the government or the party in power and the government of the day. And the investment in education, the social mobility that this party affords St. Lucians when this party is in power is unmatched, unrivaled. The United Workers' Party is about equipping people to empower themselves to do better for themselves, not handouts on a weekly basis, on a bi-monthly basis, etc. True empowerment is the difference between giving a man fish and teaching a man how to fish. The United Workers' Party prides itself on teaching people how to fish, and that is a fundamental difference. Also, I think we must recognize that the infrastructural development that this country has witnessed while the Workers' Party was in power, again, has not been matched by the Labour administration. I think we can look around. In fact, it's interesting. We just reviewed the submissions for the logo for the 50th anniversary, and one of them was able to itemize and highlight the Hess schools, the Millennium Highway. I was able to go through all the kinds of infrastructure in Rodney Bay to list them and itemize them as part embedded in the logo. And I said, wow. Like, my party is largely responsible for this. I'm happy to be affiliated with a party that is so progressive. Even my own involvement as a woman and a relatively young person, I'm told, tells me that I belong to a party that is open, that is welcoming of fresh ideas, new energy, that also there's a healthy marriage of the old and the new, and that there's room for those who feel that they have something to offer, not only at the party level, but naturally to the nation as well. So we begin, well, we've just selected the winning logo. We did so a couple nights ago, and that will be revealed to the public shortly. On the 23rd of February, we've got a family day at Sandy Beach, and it is really bringing the Flabo family together. On the 30th of March, we have a church service in the heartland of the United Workers' Party in Meekwood North, the Meekwood RC Church. And in March, the women are hosting a tea party, March 8th at Coconut Bay. March 10th and 11th, we get to the business of empowering women. So we have a 2-day conference, and we invite all women, regardless of your political affiliation. Please let us make good use of the opportunity available to you. We invite all women to participate as much as they can, because they will be equipping women with very practical tools of how to better themselves and their families.
I believe you have another call. Let's take that call and we can continue. Good evening, caller. You're on the air. Hello? Hi, you're on the air.
Hi, good evening. Dr. Rigoberт, great job.
Thank you.
There's one thing I would like to see change when UWP gets back into power. And this is the way the STEP program is being run right now. I believe we have enough land in St. Lucia where we can have these same people develop this land, right? We have our import bill is too high. And I'm certainly sure there is a number of agriculture produce that can be produced here instead of importing it. You can have these same people working the land, right, and pay them a monthly salary instead of a salary for 2 weeks, and for them to tell you, well, I take things by court, how am I supposed to pay? The job's finished. It's like you're working for yourself, right? And I'm certainly sure y'all will find a better way to put it, but let's cut down on our import bills, produce more stuff in St. Lucia. I'm seeing a lot of stuff coming from Trinidad, Barbados. I mean, come on. What is it of ours that is going out? What is it of ours that is going out? Right now, Barron left St. Lucia. Right? It's like we cannot do anything of our own. We can do more than that. There's enough young people who is into agriculture and can produce stuff down here, right? Let's change that STEP program and make it long-term instead of short-term. And this is what I have to say. Good night.
Thank you very much for calling.
Thank you, Colin. In fact, you know, just last weekend, I was having this conversation with some farmers in Meekwood North. And to the extent that some of them are saying they wish they could benefit from having some STEP workers on their farms, because for some reason few people want to do farm work anymore. So if that STEP labor was diverted to their farms, then they could make more productive use of that labor and expenditure by government. I'm really hoping that the government considers applying that thinking and allowing some of those STEP workers to be employed on the farms and do some meaningful work.
And it's an idea that's been mooted by Mr. Montoot on several occasions. Yeah. We have another call. Let's take that call. Good evening. Hello?
Yes, good evening.
You're on the air.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Gilbert.
Hello, sir. How are you?
And Mr. Dayton, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
I am a strong supporter of the UWP. And right now, it hurts me to see the way that they are trying to structure the United Workers' Party. At present, Mr. Shastney is the leader of the opposition. The question about it is, does he have the charisma to bring the fold back together? Because right now, a lot of the sheep have gone astray. It has created a bad impression about the people that we elect to represent us. The outside world is looking at our behavior. The other question is, do we have the foresight for the 20th century that we are in, the 21st century? These are the things that people are looking forward to. When we look at crime, crime in itself has tarnished Helen of the West. I am saying to you that most of the time that people commit crimes, there is lack of employment, and no one pay attention to that. I am not saying there will not be crime. There will always be crime. But we can reduce, we can curb down on crime if we create employment. The youth of today are very hyper just because of frustration, graduating from school. After graduating from school, they are still saying that they are not qualified to hold any job until they have experience. What are we putting in place for these young people, the generation coming? They will be the future leader of our country. I want to know what we decided, what foresight do we have? Thank you.
Thank you for calling.
Let me thank the caller for his opening remarks. I want to urge persons like the caller who just rang to discern between the noise and the propaganda and that which should engage us meaningfully. There is a lot of chatter out there. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of mischief. And I would really like for our followers to understand that the business at hand is strengthening our party and preparing ourselves for an election when that day comes.
Well, I think that was his first question. Does Mr. Shastney have the charisma to hold the party together?
I'm not sure that charisma is the only characteristic that one should look for. I think Mr. Shastney is part of a team that collectively has what it takes to take this country into a better place and to enhance the living standard of St. Lucians and to ensure that the misery that St. Lucians have been subjected to over the last 2 years or so can be corrected.
Right. He also had questions about the ability of the party, if elected or re-elected, the government, to handle the challenges facing the country heading into the, as far as jobs, bridging the jobs gap and the skills gap. But we'll take another call and then you can answer that question. Good evening, caller. You're on the air. Okay, we lost that call. Yeah.
Sure. We're doing what responsible parties in opposition do. That we observe what is happening in the social, in the economic and political realm, and particularly in the economic realm, and to ascertain what is working and what isn't, and to begin to devise corrective policy measures. The party spends a lot of time doing that. And I think St. Lucians are beginning to understand the difference between a government that is in power perhaps for its own sake and one that is in power to enhance the living standards of all St. Lucians regardless of party affiliation. There has just been too much chatter about the victimization that non-supporters of the Labour Party have had to go through. And the chatter is not sufficient. I think that St. Lucians need to call on the government of the day to give meaningful, equitable, non-biased, non-prejudicial representation to all St. Lucians.
Okay, let's take another call. Good evening, you're on the air.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hello.
Mrs. Regobert.
Miss, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you very kindly.
I believe that you will be a great leader in the House. You will bring a quality that we have never seen in St. Lucia. And I believe that you have the government trembling in their pants.
Oh dear.
And I wish you all the best and the party. God bless.
Thank you most kindly. Thank you. Kendall, let me emphasize that I used to say this to my students. It is all well and good to be intrinsically gifted and motivated, but the greater good is when you are part of a team that can benefit from the collective skill and talent of that team. I belong to a team of persons who are talented in their own way, and when we come together, let me tell you, we're a formidable force. I mean, I just came out of a meeting this afternoon, and the discourse, the level discourse, the concerns that were raised in a very responsible way, that we're able to discuss VAT on medication. How is it impacting persons? You can go through various economic classes and say it's affecting the working class in this way. In fact, everybody's been affected. Most certainly the poor are the ones who are bearing the brunt of this. And there's also some correlation between poverty and some of the diseases that beset our people, especially non-communicable diseases, and the inability of people to pay for their medication. And the extent to which we're able to dissect the information in a very responsible way. It's not propaganda. We sit up the figures, the policies, and we assess how people are being affected. Similarly with the revision of the subsidies on sugar, rice, and flour. I mean, everybody knows if you have flour, you have food. So when the price of flour goes up, then you are reducing somebody's capacity to have one of the core staples in their cupboard. I mean, you've got to ask the question, where's the sensitivity of this government towards poor people in St. Lucia? And that's the question of the day. Do you have any compassion towards the poor people in this country? How are you going to alleviate poverty? How are you going to cater for the thousands who leave school every year? I'm sure between last year and this year, we've graduated over 4,000, 6,000 students. Have we absorbed all these people into the workplace? I mean, let's be responsible. No one government or country can, but what provision is being made for the majority of those people? Are they adequately skilled to function within the marketplace? Are they market ready? Are they employable? Do we need to revise the curriculum and ensure that there's a closer match between the curriculum and that which the market requires? We need to ask those questions.
Yeah. You have another call? Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hello.
Good evening, Miss Rigobert.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I am listening to you. I'm watching you. I like the way you answer the questions. My lady, my girl, be strong. Don't give up. And we are heading for victory in the next election.
Thank you.
That's my girl.
Ensure you go out to vote and encourage others too.
Oh, for sure. I will.
We need to inculcate that from early o'clock.
Yeah.
Thank you. Keep praying for us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for calling. You were earlier talking about some of the activities that you have planned for the 50th anniversary. You stopped at the Women's Empowerment activity in March.
Yes, on the 8th of March, we've got the Tea Party fashion show, etc. We really want to showcase the artistic talent of females. So we've got a fashion show, we've got female authors, we've got artists who make jewelry and other works of, and artists who do various works of art, music, etc. We also have the conference on the 10th and 11th of March, and that's the Women Empowerment Conference, loosely speaking. On the 30th of March, we have the service at the Mikud Roman Catholic Church, followed by breakfast and walkabout, meet and greet the people, and we culminate with a huge rally in the heartland of the United Workers' Party. Let me take this opportunity to thank the people of Mikud North. Were it not for their love, support, and prayers, I would not be seated here with you. They have given me the privilege to serve them, and I do so with humility and with dedication. I want to ask them to continue to pray for me, and I hope that they do turn out on Saturday. It is a community meeting. It's not a political meeting. All persons residing in Micoud North are welcome to attend that meeting on Saturday evening at 6 o'clock at the Micoud Secondary School. And so I really look forward to dialoguing with my people. I think now they understand they'll have to share me a little bit more of the nation, so to speak. But I manage my time very well, so I think we'll be okay.
A quick question before we wrap up.
Oh dear.
It says citizens, or do you agree that citizens overlook corruption among politicians because of the lack of empirical evidence that it occurs, and the sense that there will be no accountability? We talk about crime, but how often are our senior police officers, government officials, or ministers of government brought before the courts or imprisoned?
Politicians, like every other citizen in this country, are required to obey the rule of law. In fact, if anything, politicians are held to higher standards. And they should not fail the people in that regard.
30 seconds, parting words.
I really want to thank my party for the trust and the confidence that they have invested in me, beginning the people of Micoud North naturally. But I think nationally, the people of the United Workers' Party have really embraced me. And let me say as well, all politics aside, there's a general sentiment of goodwill towards me. In fact, the Labour supporters often stop me and say how much they like me, they love to listen to me. I'm just on the wrong side, whatever that means. But that means there's some acknowledgement that you can put the politics aside and to recognize when someone has made the sacrifice to serve. And I really want to say to young people, please, it's a noble profession. It has its headache. But I think that I'm really encouraged when I see young people who express their interest in politics, and to urge my colleagues to remember that young people are looking at us, they're staring at us, they're scrutinizing us, and we have to be responsible in the way that we conduct ourselves, both in and out of the house, because in the same way that I looked up to many politicians when I was younger, I'm ever mindful that I have a tremendous responsibility to the young people in particular, to conduct myself in a particular way and to conduct the affairs of my party in such a way that more young, talented people be attracted to my party. And indeed, the application forms are available and they're welcome to join us. Thank you
very much, Dr. Gail Rigobert, Micoud North MP and leader of the opposition in waiting.
In waiting.
Officially February 1st, you
Yes.
assume the role.
Yes.
I want to thank you very much for spending the last 90 minutes with us, and thank you very much for watching and for calling. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.